When I came here, everyone thought Bush was going to win. And then they took a poll and they found out Trump was up by about 50 points. Everyone said, what's going on right here? They thought Bush, because Bush supposedly was a military person. Great. You know what? He was a military. He got us into the Middle East. How did that work out? There has only been, listen to this, one such whale killed off the coast of South Carolina in the last 50 years. But on the other hand, their windmills are causing whales to die in numbers never seen before. Nobody does anything about that. They're washing up and show. I saw it this weekend. 3 of them came up. You wouldn't see it once a year. Now they're coming up on a weekly basis. The windmills are driving them crazy. They're driving the whales, I think, a little batty.
That is indeed what people are saying.
How do you feel about windmills, Phil Mattingly?
Not nearly as passionately as former President Trump does, to say the least. Joining us now, CNN political analyst Natasha Alford, former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and who also served on the January 6th committee, Maura Gillespie, and senior Washington correspondent, and for Bloomberg, Saleha Mohsen. Guys, let's start with the idea that I don't think Governor Jeb Bush in Florida launched the invasion of Iraq. The windmills thing has long been a fixation for the former president. Don't really understand where he's going with it. But, like, if Biden had said any of that stuff on the stump, people would have lost their minds. 77-year-old Donald Trump says it, and it's like, eh.
You know, it's interesting. I think that because Donald Trump has a lot of bluster and energy, people sometimes confuse that with being, like, rational and logical. But all of that aside, what's really fascinating is that he has to sell that he is truly about union workers after 4 years of policies that were actually quite mixed, that didn't actually serve union workers. And so this strategy that he's employing now of sort of sowing division between the union workers and their leadership is a really fascinating one. And it speaks to him trying to detract from the fact that his policies didn't necessarily serve these laborers.
The White House is trying to push on the policy front, out with a statement this morning saying, look, under Biden, 235,000 auto jobs have been created. That's their claim. And they say that's 4 times under Trump. The question is it just the union that actually wins out from the 2 of them being there this week as they continue to point at the CEO pay, continue to point at the hours they work, what AI is going to mean? Does this just help the union just have both of them there this week?
It also helps the whole Rust Belt. I'm from Ohio. When you have 2 candidates with that kind of pull coming into Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and across those states, you're getting finally the attention from the country and policymakers on the East Coast in Washington that those people didn't really get. That's why Trump was elected. They were the forgotten man that he shined a spotlight on. And so now we have a Democratic presidential candidate who is determined to make sure that he also is part of the effort to listen to them, to go and talk to them. So it's going to draw attention to the union vote itself, but also everyone else in that region, all the other economic sectors that are contributing to the economy and other people who are getting the bite from inflation, who suffered during COVID, and who just want to be heard.
You know, Maura, what's interesting to me is it's a great point. And if you talk to Biden economic officials, as I know you have every day, probably 50 times a day for the last 2.5 years, so much of Biden's agenda was not necessarily, with the exception of the immediate rescue plan, was long-term, right? We want to build things that actually help communities or kind of sit and grow inside communities that have long been forgotten or have long been left in places like Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. And yet people don't seem to be feeling that based on kind of the top-line economic polls, despite the macroeconomic numbers. Why do you think that is?
We live in a society now where it's microwave. We need it immediately. And if it's not right before us, in front of us, tangible, we can feel it, we don't really pay attention to it. So, I mean, think back when Biden recently announced the medications that are now, he announced 2 medications he's going to make available and free and things like that. That's not going to happen until well down the road, and he won't get credit for it. So it's great to have these policies. It's great to have the Infrastructure Act. We have seen some projects being built, and you're seeing Republicans tout that, even though they didn't vote for it necessarily. But we live in a world where we want to see it right now, and if we don't, then we're distracted by something else. And Trump is so good at distracting and pointing out, well, I'm here for you. He's coming in today as like, I'm a champion for union workers. It doesn't matter if that's true or not. He can say it to them and point out that Biden's not looking out for you. He's looking over for EVs. He's sending all the jobs to China. And he could just sit there and be, a savior to them as he presents himself, but without getting fact-checked in real time.
Explain the electric vehicle issue that the Biden administration is pushing so hard and why it's concerning to these union auto workers, because many of the EVs are not made by union workers, right?
Yeah.
That's the contrast here, that Biden's going to have to straddle that today.
Poppy, that just gets to the heart of it. What the union workers see is that we have a president right now who wants to support electric vehicle production. That means less workers in factories, on assembly lines, less humans who are helping build those. Also, China has a lot of EV production, so Trump can come with his old adage of jobs being shipped to China. What the UAW workers and union workers need to hear from Biden is that I will find a way to protect your jobs, even though I support the EV push.
Can he do that?
It's a fine line. I don't even think his half a century in Congress is going to help him with that. But let's see. We're going to see him on the picket line.
We still need cars. We still need gas cars, right? We don't have the infrastructure right now to even have, if everyone were supposed to get an EV, we don't have the infrastructure to do it. We don't have enough generating stations in this country to sustain that. So I think that's also an issue where.
But that's the point of the subsidies.
Yeah. And he could talk about that, right? He could point out, okay, we need more generating stations. And I know people get all nervous about nuclear, but we do need more nuclear generating stations in this country to be able to facilitate the energy needed for EVs.
And what these workers need is not false promises, right? Look at Lordstown, Ohio, where Donald Trump said, don't sell your houses, right? I will, I will protect your jobs. And what happened was the factory didn't come back. So again, a lot of bluster, but if you don't have the policy to back it up, what's the difference for people on the ground?
Which is like the most amazing thing. Like, no one remembers that. He literally was promising people to their faces that he was going to save everything in Lordstown, and it shut down like 3 months later. I do want to ask, Maura, as a respected political communicator, the idea of, people are saying, much like the windmills, the idea that Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis will be holding a debate, which was just announced yesterday. I know the Biden team looks at Governor Newsom as a good surrogate, an effective surrogate. Why is this happening?
Ron DeSantis needs to have something of a jumpstart to his campaign. He's seen numbers kind of slope down. And this is an opportunity because a lot of people on the right think that Gavin Newsom will run for president. People have been kind of speculating, will the President Biden actually go through with running for president even in 2024, given his most recent polling numbers are really pretty abysmal. So this is an opportunity for Ron DeSantis to go head-to-head with who he thinks will be running for president and position himself as the #1 candidate over Donald Trump. This is really an opportunity for Ron DeSantis to kind of show what he's made of, because he has not done well thus far. In the first debate, we'll see what happens tonight.
Do you think it's a good venue for him?
I don't. Just being honest.
Just some candid from a Republican strategist.
Just being
Appreciate
honest.
it. Maura, Natasha, and Saleha.
Thanks, guys.